All right, welcome back. This is Benjamin Hadfield. I'm a technical dive instructor with Teach Me to Dive here in Idaho, and I teach in Florida as well, of course. And we have a special guest for us today. This is part two with Becky Schott. And part one, if you haven't watched it, make sure to go back and watch part one. And the way to keep up with this kind of stuff is make sure to subscribe to our channel, share it with your friends, all the fun stuff, and hit the notification bell because interviews like this are pretty common for us, but Becky Schott is definitely well above common. She is amazing with her 5 Emmys and just scads and scads of amazing information as well. Becky, thank you for coming back.
Thanks. This is really fun.
Awesome. Well, Becky, let's just jump into the meat and potatoes, if you will. Can you share some key challenges you've encountered while doing these deep rebreather dives in the Great Lakes?
Yeah, nothing about the Great Lakes is easy. Let's put it that way. It's definitely challenging diving because of the colds mainly. And then a lot of the shipwrecks that I like to photograph are just beyond recreational limits. So anywhere from 150 to 300 feet deep in the lakes, or maybe even just a little bit beyond 300. Like to me, 300 feet in the Great Lakes is very different than doing 300 feet in Florida, like just because of the cold and the timing and the planning involved. Typically our bottom temperatures are somewhere, I mean, in the summertime, you're probably around 37, 38 degrees. So you really have to like kind of do a lot of buildup with cold water diving first. So you know how much time you can really spend on the bottom and then uh, getting through your deco without being too cold. And because like early in the season, we don't have many thermoclines. Like they're very, very slight thermoclines. So you might have like 42 degrees on the surface and you just know that you're going to be doing deco, for, 60, 80 minutes in pretty cold water. So yeah, there's nothing about it's too easy. Sometimes we get choppy conditions. Other times it's flat calm. Love those days. But for the most part, it's obviously completely worth it because to me, I think it's the best shipwreck diving on the planet. So it's worth it to get down to those shipwrecks.
So how do you physically prepare for that kind of dive?
So every year I always start, even though I do a lot of diving all throughout the year, and a lot of my diving is cold water diving, whether it's the Arctic or Antarctic. Sometimes the Great Lakes can feel warm compared to those places. I always start out, especially because we're diving rebreathers in the Great Lakes, around May or June. Basically like hitting the reset button. I go, all right, let's just pretend all the rest of the year hasn't happened, and I'm going to go to my local quarry. I'm going to get in the water with my dry suit, my thermals, my heated undergarments, test everything out, make sure my dry suit is dry, make sure my heat is working, get the rebreather on because it always feels like, a little awkward at first, with all the bulky undergarments and dry gloves and things like that. And just get in, and I just maybe just do a dive to 25 feet and just run through all of my skills and make sure everything is working on the rebreather. Like I said, dry suit's dry, which is most important in cold water, and just get myself back up to speed, do bottle drills, clipping things on and off before I even put a camera in my hands. So for me, I always tell people life support first and then photography second. So I make sure I do those dives, those work up and shake out dives. And then I start small. So after the quarry, I will probably try to do some recreational dives, or usually I teach some rebreather classes in May or June. That way, selfishly, it gets my own skills up to speed, spending like 8 hours in the water, like just doing drills over and over again. So by the time I get out to start my deep shipwreck diving in the Great Lakes, I personally feel confident because I know I've practiced my own skills over and over, and all my gear should be working properly. So
Right on. I think that's a huge thing. Life support first. I mean, the camera gear is like I think a lot of us carry, camera gear, probably not quite to your extent, but that stuff's not light usually. And getting in the water and it becomes this big entrapment hazard almost, right?
yeah, I mean, I diving rebreather, and I'm sure you agree with any kind of technical gear or technical environment. Everything has to be muscle memory. So, like when something happens, you just react to it without thinking about it. So that muscle memory has to be ingrained. And sometimes even driving out to like, my dive site, if I'm driving 12 hours away or something, I'm just running through drills in my head or what if scenarios. That way they're just fresh in my mind because I think I've had just about every single thing happen to me that could happen to you underwater, except a full flood on a rebreather. Knock on wood. So I like to really, I know those things can happen, so I like to run through those in my head, because once I do have a big camera in my hands, maybe 5 or 6 lights clipped off to me, other things happening, then I want to make sure I react if something happens, and I'm always paying attention to the life support equipment first.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. So your work often involves these amazing deep wrecks where you're setting up multiple lights all over the place. What are some of the key techniques and equipment you use to set up these amazing shots that are well lit?
I love, sometimes I'm diving wrecks I've never been on before, or other times they're wrecks I've gone back to 4, 5, 6, 7 years in a row. Because I have this like vision in my mind of a shot that I want to get. And sometimes I don't quite execute it, or maybe the conditions don't quite allow for it. So until I feel like I can get the shot that I'm envisioning, I'll just keep going back for it. But yeah, so each wreck I try to do something different on. Sometimes it's just natural lighting. Some are just, I don't know, spooky enough, or there's great visibility in some of these locations in the Great Lakes where you can see, 30 meters or around 100 feet underwater at 200 feet. There's enough ambient light that you can see that far. So sometimes I think doing too much lighting can take away from the wreck, or take away from the shot. So I try to do something very specific on each wreck that I dive. Other wrecks, I go, you know what? I love this wheelhouse. I really want to make this look like, it's sailing on the bottom of the lake bed, almost like a ghost ship. And so, I may just have some light coming from the wheelhouse. And I love using divers in my shots, because I feel like just seeing a wreck or a cave, to me, it's a little boring. I like connection, and seeing a person in that shot is a way that like anybody can look at that photo, whether you're a diver or a non-diver, and connect with that shipwreck or that underwater environment and go, oh wow, look, there's a person there. Look, what are they looking at? Oh, they're looking at an anchor, or oh, they're in an underwater cave. They're looking at, some really interesting formation. I feel like it draws you in, and you feel like you could be that person, or it just connects the diver with the environment. So anyway, I like to use people in my shots. A lot of my friends laugh because they say, "Oh, I'm just a prop." There's what I call hero shots, where you see more of the diver in the shot and less of the shipwreck. I like it when you see more of the shipwreck and less of the diver. So the diver might just be really, really small somewhere in the shot. You really can't tell who they are, but again, it still sort of connects. It connects you and kind of brings you in, and it shows you that people are there and connecting with the environment.
Right on. I like that. Add that personal, and don't overlight it. I think that's one of the things that I've
Mhm.
seen some of the caves that they do some of these photography, and it's almost like, wait a minute, that's a lot of flipping light.
Yeah, light is one of the most important things for any photographer. Too much of it, too little of it, can make or break a shot, or where your model is pointing their light can make or break a shot. I remember when I first started out shooting in caves, and I mean, because that was the environment I started really with my underwater photography. I'd give remote strobes to my models, and maybe I wouldn't give a good enough briefing at the time, and the cave wall would be right here, and they're like holding the strobe against, like almost against the cave wall, and obviously that blows out the whole wall, it ruins the shot, and everything is dark behind them. So it I learned to give more specific briefings and exactly where they should hold it, or and things like that. That way it wouldn't ruin the shot. Or if I knew somebody just was overwhelmed by, say, holding a strobe or a light, I would mount it, or that's where I started placing them a lot myself, because sometimes giving that task loading can really overwhelm someone. So yeah, overlighting can be an issue and really take away from the shot. So sometimes I will spend a lot of time thinking about a specific wreck and how I want to light it. I'll get down there, and maybe it's in an engine room, let's say, and I will light up this entire engine room. I'll spend a lot of time on it, and then like my favorite shot of the day ends up being one where we were just entering, and I was following my buddy, and I just did a test shot, and maybe it's just like one streak of light that's going, through the darkness, and I'm like, yeah, that looks much better. It looks eerier, it looks cooler with just the one light versus me setting up 8 lights in there. So yeah, it's always fascinating to see what you end up liking. You can put a lot of planning into something. It doesn't mean that it's going to turn out right or perfect or be your favorite shot at the end of the day.
I understand that completely. I've got a fun story I'll share with you offline about that one, about something else. But so, Becky, our industry is really all about risk and risk management. Tell me about the biggest risk you took and how did you overcome it?
Mm. I feel like what I'm doing with imaging in extreme environments, it definitely it is risky. Like let's just put that out there. I mean, we are diving in already dangerous environments, risky, challenging environments, whether it be caves, under ice, deep, cold shipwrecks, and things can go wrong. So it is risky. And then put a camera on top of that, and a plan, and a team, or a producer that has expectations of certain shots that they need to achieve for a documentary on that specific dive. That creates a lot of pressure as well. So I'd say like the biggest things that I've had to overcome um is uh what do you call it? Managing expectations, and also learning to say no, or calling dives, because it is very difficult to be in that position as, I mean, say, a dive leader, and you have a group or a production team, or you've paid a lot of money to be in a certain location, and things are just not going right that day. The conditions just aren't right. Maybe you're just not feeling right that day. I have checklists for everything, whether it's the rebreather, my camera equipment, the lights we use. Like there's checklists for everything because there's so much going on. And so just being able to say, you know what, today is not the day. And it's a very difficult decision to make, but these are risky environments, and you don't know what can happen. So I'd say most of the dangerous situations I've been put in have been in productions, because we're only in a location for a certain amount of time. We need to get a certain amount of shots, or we need to go to a specific place, or maybe somewhere I've never been before. And it does cause you to push the limits. And I'd be lying if I didn't say I haven't pushed the limits or pushed beyond what I knew was correct to do underwater. Like we're all taught rules in diving. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't break those rules. But when I have broken those rules, something has happened that has humbly reminded me to not break those rules again, because I like my life and I want to keep doing this. So yeah, that's probably, I would say, one of the hardest things to do is just call it or say no. But it's important to know that it's like back to what the golden rule of diving 101 in an open water class, right? Anyone can call a dive for at any time for any reason, and no one should put you down about it. So big believer in that.
Absolutely. One of my proudest moments, I had a big tough Marine this winter. I was teaching ice diving to, and he'd just been out for about 6 months, but he was infantry, well muscled. And I talk about that exactly, being able to thumb the dive at any time for any reason. He got in the hole, got down for about 30 seconds, came back up and says, I've got to call it. I need to reset. Helped him out of the hole, gave him a high five, put him in the tent, let him get warm, let him reset. 15 minutes later, came out and did a perfect dive. But I love that you bring that up, because anybody should be able to do that at any time. It doesn't matter the expense of the dive, where you're at, what's going on. So
I have a lot more respect for the people that can say, you know what, today's just not my day, or I'm not feeling it. And I think also sometimes as like a dive instructor or dive leader, you have to look around at the comfort level of the people who are around you, and pushing someone like a little bit is okay, because that's if it's going to be a new experience, or if they need to learn from it. But when you can see the uncomfortable look on someone's face, or you just can see that things are happening, it could snowball into something so much worse. So sometimes others don't want to say something, but if you're the one that says, you know what, I'm not feeling it today, let's go to breakfast, then a lot of times I'll notice that everybody follows suit, and they go, yeah, okay, that sounds great, and they're just waiting for one person to speak up and call the dive. But I sit out plenty of dives before I even get in the water every year. I just go, you know what? Didn't get a lot of sleep last night. I was having some camera issues, that I was trying to fix, or maybe a rebreather issue I was trying to fix, and I'm just not feeling it today. And the wreck, the cave, it's going to be there. I'll come back another day.
That's the amazing part. The ocean will be there tomorrow.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So, Becky, underwater photography, it's a very unique form that you're working in. What advice do you have to aspiring underwater photographers like me that are looking to improve our skills and be more like Becky?
Be more like Becky. I would say just keep doing it. Like, it has to be a passion first. And I mean, I started as just a hobbyist underwater photographer, and I kept shooting because I loved it. And I would also say, experiment. Try to find your own style. You can get inspiration from other photographers and other styles, but I think finding your own unique style is really important, and it can help you stand out, in this vast world of so many underwater photographers out there. But definitely having a passion for it first, and loving it, and loving your photos for you, because they're going to be your memories at the end of the day. So shoot what you like, and just experiment and have fun with it.
Right on. So, how do you assure your safety during these dives and these photography missions that you're doing in remote locations and extreme conditions?
How do I ensure safety?
How do you assure your safety?
Well, I put a lot of planning into all the dives that we do, the locations that we're in. I personally, especially if it's a rebreather dive or if it's a technical dive in some way, whether it's I'm on open circuit in a cave or rebreather on a deep wreck, I always have a safety diver with me, and that diver is, or basically my dive buddy. Like, he or she stays with me the entire dive, because I've had a lot of like mishaps in caves where there were miscommunications, and then everybody left, or they were supposed to go down a tunnel and turn around and come back, and then all of a sudden they're gone. So I've always kept, now, like, for the like over the last 12 years, somebody who their purpose is to stay with me, and maybe I need to hand them lights or my camera if I need to fix something on my gear. I mean, and I don't know that that ensures safety, but it certainly gives me a peace of mind, like knowing that somebody is always there with me, to help me out in case of an emergency or in case I need something. So, like, I've been doing these photogrammetry dives for the last 3 years, where I shoot, a 3D model of a shipwreck, and there are thousands and thousands of images. But when I go down, I have to shoot every part of the shipwreck. And so, personally, I'm the bad buddy because I can't be turning around and paying attention to my buddy, but I also don't want to be solo. And it's pretty boring because we're just making circles around the shipwreck. But I have, a really great dive buddy that stays with me, and he basically just sings. So I can hear him through his rebreather the whole time. So he picks some songs and he just sings. So I know he's behind me. And we go through, and I can do my photogrammetry, because then again, it gives me peace of mind. I can do my job better knowing that somebody's there with me in case of an emergency.
Now that you bring up a good point. Can you explain a little bit more about 3D photogrammetry?
Yeah, photogrammetry. It's a really amazing technology that, you go down, and you can do it in caves, but mainly on shipwrecks is where it's used. And I take thousands. I mean, you could do a very small object, like, say, this coffee cup, and maybe only take like 10 photos and make a 3D model out of it. But when I do a shipwreck, it can be anywhere from 1,500 to 5,000, 10,000 images, and they're all high resolution images, and you cover every part of the shipwreck. And then later put those high resolution images into software that will match them up. So every image has to be overlapped so that it can find points on that image to match up with other points. And then you create a whole 3D, image, or basically an exact replica of what that shipwreck looks like. And it's really incredible because this could be used with VR goggles, and you could do a virtual dive on the shipwreck. I have a museum exhibit right now in Wisconsin. So, everywhere from divers, non-divers, kids can go in, and basically, it's on a big computer screen, and they can kind of explore it. You can zoom in and zoom out, and you're looking at the exact shipwreck. Again, an interesting technology, because you can't always see the entire shipwreck with your own eyes. You might only be able to see 10 feet, or you might be able to see 100 feet. But if the shipwreck is 500 feet long, you still can't see the whole thing. So to be able to get an exact rendering with a 3D model of a shipwreck. It's really interesting just to see see the whole wreck in its entirety. And you can also use these to 3D print the shipwrecks with a 3D printer, and also down the road monitor shipwrecks and how they might be breaking down. So places like Truck Lagoon, friends of mine, Pete Mesley, has started like a Truck Lagoon project. Project Baseline, that they're going to try to shoot a lot of the shipwrecks year after year because some of them are collapsing, and I mean they've been underwater for almost 80 years, so you can kind of see how shipwrecks are changing over time and over the years.
Wow. So what software do you use to stitch this all together?
There's a couple different softwares out there, but I use one called Metashape. It's made by Agisoft.
Wow. How long does it take to render these photos?
Well, it depends on how many photos you take. So if you're only taking something like doing a model of something simple in your house, like say, a teddy bear or something like that. Maybe that's only 10 or 15 images. Oh, that would take it would still take you to get through. There's about 4 processes that you need to do to build up the model. So it might take you 20 minutes or so, something like that. But when I have recs that I'm processing that are, say, around 2,000 images, it could take me 24 hours a day, maybe 2 days to even process and align all the images and build the model.
Wow.
Yeah, it sounds like my computer's gonna blow up sometimes, but thankfully, newer computers, better, CPUs and GPUs, can really help. They're very graphics intensive, so I've got some computers and laptops with some really good graphics cards that can help build these models.
That is amazing. Can you describe your approach when you start doing these 3D photos and what how you put that together? How do you approach this?
Yeah, so first you have to approach the shipwreck, and every shipwreck, as you know, is completely different. Some are, very intact and upright, some are blown apart, maybe a bow is separated from a stern. I've done airplanes, and airplanes are completely different because they have more rounded engines and rounded fuselages. So that required a lot more images on something with rounded curves versus something with more straight edges. So what I do first is I do research, and I go, all right, I'm going to shoot. I'll just throw one out there. The windiest shipwreck in the Great Lakes, and so I'll look at the wreck and look at the depth, the size of it, and start to plan out my dive from there. Because it could take me one dive, it could take me several dives, depending on how large and how deep the wreck is. So something in shallow water where you can spend a lot of time and you're on a rebreather may only take you 45 minutes to an hour on one dive. But if it's in 200 feet of water, depending on the size, it could take me 1 to 3 dives to be able to get all of the images. So I plan out how many dives I think we're going to need. And then some of it's up to luck. So again, back to the Windiet, that's 140 feet long. It's in 185 feet of water. I kind of dreamed it out in my head, or I planned the dive in my head and thought to myself, all right, if I get down on the wreck, I start shooting right away. I need to make a pass. I need to make at least 3 passes around the wreck on that particular one to get all the images that I thought I would need. But then the difficult part of that particular wreck was it has masts that are still standing, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to get all the way up each one of these masts on one dive. But I thought, you know what? It'll probably take me about 35 minutes of bottom time, 185 feet, 37-degree water to get down, and if everything goes right, I can probably get the entire structure of the wreck, maybe a little bit of the masts, and it did. It took me 37 minutes of bottom time. I didn't get all the way up the foremast, but I did get pretty much all of the shipwreck. There's a little lifeboat off to the side, and it only took me one dive. Now, also on that day, the visibility was very good, and there was a lot of ambient light, and that can also help with photogrammetry because if it's darker or the visibility is worse, then you need to be closer to the shipwreck, which means you need to do more passes around the shipwreck. So
Mhm.
because the visibility was so good, I only needed to do 3, but if it was worse, I might have needed to do 4 or more if I was closer, because you need to cover, like I said, you need to cover every inch of that shipwreck, and all of your images need to be overlapping. So it can be, sometimes you can do a lot of planning and you get down there and the visibility or the conditions aren't what you expected, and it can take more dives. But luckily, if you just sort of, as long as your images overlap, you can go back down on the dives and just start where you left off or a little bit before where you left off, and the software will find areas to connect and put the model together. So it's pretty exciting. I've also done it where I've started assembling my model in the software and found what's called holes or places where I may have missed, and then I've gone back for future dives, covered those areas, reinserted those images to finish the model.
Wow.
Yeah,
That
it's
is
become my obsession.
my new obsession. That to learn
It's
how
what
to
I
do.
did in 2020 when the pandemic hit. I was like, wow, I really wanted to learn photogrammetry all these years. I'm like, well, I've got a lot of free time now. so so
Right
I,
on.
yeah.
Well, what advice would you give to others that are getting ready to enter into technical diving?
Getting ready to enter into technical diving. Just know that it's not a fast process. It's not going to be zero to hero, and it should not be zero to hero. If you meet an instructor or a dive shop that tells you you can be diving the Andrea Doria shipwreck, on a rebreather in trimix within a year, then you should probably find somebody else. Because in this sport, and especially with technical diving, the you need to gain and build experience. So, and the only way to do that is through time. So just enjoy the journey. Like, learn from various instructors. There's a lot of different people out there that have a lot of different skill sets and information to share with you. So I love it. I love taking classes from different instructors and learning from different people. I feel like you can always learn something from someone. So, vary your instructors up a little bit, but find good ones. Don't just sign up for a class with an instructor. I personally interview my students when they're taking classes from me, and I think a student should interview their instructor as well, and ask them questions about the types of diving that they do, and because like maybe that doesn't match up with the type of diving you're doing. I mean, I don't want that to sound bad, but there's a lot of instructors that sell rebreathers that only dive in quarries or only dive, and in say the Great Lakes, which there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're a diver, if you're a cave diver and you're going to be traveling, maybe you want to learn from somebody who has that type of experience as well. So I would just say try to interview your instructor as well, and make sure you're a good fit and they're doing the types of diving that you want to do in the future.
Right on. So, for you personally, what was the biggest challenge you had to deal with entering into tech?
For me, it was, yeah, just age and money. Was probably the biggest challenge. I actually didn't know that I wanted to be a technical diver. I got into diving because I loved sharks and marine life and fish, and caves were in my backyard in Florida. So when I started diving caverns for the first time, and I saw all that water rushing out of a dark hole, I found it to be quite scary at first. So I took a class, my first cavern class, and it really taught me about the environment and baby steps, I guess. But yeah, I didn't really know I wanted to be a technical diver. I just sort of, I guess, fell into it and then started falling in love with the unique environments. And I liked the fact that not a lot of people at the time were going to these places. And as an aspiring photographer, also at the time, I thought, all right, this could be a great niche. Like, I want to show others how beautiful and not scary like caves can be. So that's what started my kind of my passion for shooting in extreme environments.
Right on. So, Jasmine, a student that I instructed, had a question. She says, "How have you noticed any difference between the way men and women approach dive training?"
Yes, I think they definitely approach it differently. But I mean, at the same time, people are all different. Personalities are all different. An engineer approaches dive training much differently than somebody else. I think a lot of women are sometimes come into it more organized. But I mean, that's just kind of a generality. I've had students across the board that, have all been good. I think the hardest students for me have been, people that are already really experienced divers. So because then for them to take a step back and relearn something or be a student again, I think that's more difficult than sometimes having somebody who's fresh and new in tech diving. They're more of a sponge and they're willing to like learn and try new things, or um, there's no bad habits to break yet, versus somebody who's been diving for 20 years and who's already a trimix open circuit diver, then taking a rebreather class. Sometimes there's a lot of bad habits to break, like lots of mask clearing, and you're like, stop, you have to stop clearing your mask, you're draining your diluent. So but between men and women, uh, I mean, there's definitely differences, but I mean, I couldn't even say one was better or worse. I've had good and bad students on both sides.
Now, in your opinion, how has your work inspired the next generation of explorers and ocean enthusiasts?
You know what? I love it when I get emails from, anyone, younger people that, say that they got into tech diving because they saw some of my photos of the Great Lakes. That's probably one of the most common ones that I hear is, "I never thought I would do cold water diving," or, "I had absolutely no interest in shipwrecks or technical diving, but I saw your pictures in the Great Lakes, and so that inspired me to go take an Intro to Tech and Deco Procedures course or advanced nitrox and, go take it to the next level." So, to me, there's no bigger compliment because they're saying they never would have done that unless they saw the images. So, um, so yeah, that's pretty
Right
amazing.
on.
Yeah.
So, when you moved into CCR, what was the biggest surprise?
Ooh, I struggled when I first moved into CCR. I did not have a great instructor. It was my first instructor, and I actually shouldn't put it this way. He was just very relaxed and I needed a little bit more guidance. So my biggest struggle was understanding like why I was doing a certain skill. Like it wasn't I didn't feel like it really clicked or made sense to me. Like, all right, we're doing a dill flush, but why are we doing a dill flush? I know how to do it. I can physically do it, but when am I supposed to do this? So I've tried to take that and incorporate how I felt in my training, back that was in 16, 17 years ago. But today, like I quiz my students constantly. I'm like, all right, this has happened. Why are we doing this? And just keep them thinking and understanding, or it shows me like, all right, it's not clicking as to, why, how like why this flood drill isn't, or how they're doing the flood drill and then correcting it from there, or boom drills, just keeping my divers thinking. So I think for me, my biggest challenge was just understanding the skills when I first got into CCR diving. And I think the more you understand something, the more comfortable you feel with it. So honestly, my first year of CCR diving, I did never felt truly comfortable in the unit, because I had been diving doubles for a long time and multiple stages, and I was really dialed in on open circuit. So transitioning to the CCR that first year was definitely a challenge, like it is for a lot of people, figuring out buoyancy again and understanding skills. But it wasn't until I did a crossover to my Meg and I started understanding some skills more. For me, the unit fit me better because I could use my own back plate and harness versus a built-in one that came with the Evolution. It started to feel better, like when the equipment fit better and I understood this, like the reasoning behind the skills that I was doing, everything just started making sense and I started loving it.
Right on.
Yeah.
So, what's your favorite dive location?
My favorite dive location. Ooh, that changes up. Well, I mean, I'd have to say the Great Lakes. If I could pick one place to go, I'm probably going to go to the Great Lakes because there are over 6,000 shipwrecks. And I mean, there's so many locations all over all five of the lakes. And even after 12, 13 years of diving the Great Lakes, I see new shipwrecks every year and I haven't seen them all. So I love that there's always a new shipwreck to see, and I've got some incredible friends that find shipwrecks every year. And so then there's always new ones being discovered. And I love that there's still new things being discovered out there.
Nice.
Mhm.
Finally, Becky, what's next for Becky?
Ooh, what's next? I always have a lot going on. I've got a great relationship. I'm doing a lot of shooting with Seiko watches right now, and unfortunately, my museum exhibit is coming to a close. But I'm really hoping to do more exhibits and use my work to help educate and inspire others. So I worked all winter with the Wisconsin Maritime Museum on a shipwreck exhibit in the Great Lakes called Bringing Shipwrecks to Life. And it was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun as well. And it was amazing to go out there and see. I have 50 shipwreck images and my photogrammetry and video that I've done over the last 13 years. And it was amazing to see people's reactions and share all of this, because I feel like at some point you have all of this work or this body of work, and you need to do something with it. And I would love to do more museum exhibits or more interpretive type exhibits like that, and share my work with the public, because I think just knowing what's down there or what's out there and the history is amazing. So I think that will keep people interested in our sport. And in the end, that's what I'd like the most. I feel like scuba diving has touched my life as it's probably touched your life, and it's one of the most amazing things that I think is out there. And so I think to share that, whether somebody will ever dive or not, for them to see all of these amazing underwater environments that we get to see, is truly amazing. So I want to share that.
Right on. Becky, thank you so much for taking the time with me today. We took a lot of time of your time, and I'm greatly appreciative of it.
Thanks so much for having me. It was really great chatting with you.
Awesome. Well, there you have it. Becky Schott. Amazing. Make sure to watch part 1 of this interview. You won't regret it one bit. Again, my name is Benjamin Hadfield. I'm with Teach Me to Dive. I'm a technical dive instructor, and I teach here in Idaho in the cold, dark waters. Not nearly as nice as the Great Lakes, but that's one of my dreams one day, to join Becky on some Great Lakes dives. We also teach in Florida as well and have a good time with that. Again, make sure to hit the subscribe, share this with your friends, and hit the notification button, because you don't want to miss out a second of the oceanic goodness we have in store for you. Thank you, Becky.
Thank you.